I tried recording this video, but my mic wasn't on. Let's try again. Now that the third Tales from the Pizzaplex book is finally released, I'm doing summaries on each of the stories in the book. Yesterday I released my summary on the first story, Somnophobia, and today I'm doing a summary on the second story, Pressure. I've been told that this story is really good, although I have been spoiled on a couple things, but not too much. So I'm excited to finally read the story. So without further ado, I hope you all enjoy, and let's get started. The story begins with our main character Luca, a senior in high school hanging out with his three friends Nolan, Maddie, and Asher. They weren't exactly the best friends you could ask for, they were kind of assholes, and here at the beginning of the story, Nolan is playfully fighting Luca, literally throwing him against the wall and grabbing him in a headlock. Asher wasn't really a problem, but Nolan was a huge one. Nolan was dating Luca's longtime friend, who was Maddie, and Luca was in love with her, and Nolan knew exactly how Luca felt, but just didn't really care. Maddie and Nolan had been crowned homecoming king and queen, and Nolan acted like they were like an actual royal couple. Asher told them all to stop messing around, and Nolan was just like making out with Maddie. Asher was 6'2" and was supposedly a pretty good looking guy, recently getting into theater. When they were younger, Asher wanted to be a lawyer like his dad, but now he wanted to be an actor. Luca, on the other hand, was 5'10" and wanted to be a football coach. Asher told everyone to check out these costumes and to pick a scenario where they could decide who they wanted to be. They were currently in the costume closet of the roleplay venue of Freddy Fazbear's Mega Pizzaplex. Luca was impressed by all the animal suits and costumes. Looking around, Luca saw many kids and teens going through costumes, some little girls arguing over who would dress as Chica, some of Luca's classmates were looking at a Golden Freddy costume. Luca also noticed a security guard costume, and while he did know that in the Fazbear Entertainment game security guards didn't usually do well, he liked the idea of being the hero. The roleplay area was nicknamed the Urban Legend Roleplayers Auditorium, as people used it to reenact the old rumors of the children going missing and being stuffed away in the Freddy's building somewhere and finding a way to possess the costumes. Luca was pretty sure these stories were true and weren't just rumors. Asher points out a storyboard he thought they should act out where three teens break into the Fazbear's Fright attraction and get stalked by Springtrap and have to get away before he kills them. Luca said that he thought they would be acting out the actual haunting, and Maddie said that that's just because he wanted to, because he's obsessed with the murderous animatronic thing, which she thinks is a stupid concept. Luca asks where they think Fazbear Entertainment got the ideas for their games, trying to claim that they are real and are actually genius for trying to make light of the stories, making games about crawling through vents and shutting doors and hiding in costumes because the animatronics actually got out of control and murdered people. Most of the game scenarios for the roleplay area were about surviving a night where killer animatronics are out to get you, or even having to keep a music box wound up so a ghost doesn't get you. The others didn't really care and thought it was stupid, except Asher, who seemed to get what Luca was saying, but he also didn't really care. So Nolan, Asher, and Maddie all picked out costumes to be the teens who broke into Fazbear's Fright. That left Luca with Springtrap. He wanted to be a guard, but there was no guard in Green-Eared Killer, which was the name of the scenario they were choosing. Luca didn't really want to be the killer, but the others weren't so lenient about it, and so he was stuck with it. It's also mentioned that Luca has gray eyes, which is interesting as William Afton in the Silver Eyes has gray eyes, and Luca here is being forced to pose as Springtrap, who is William Afton. So Luca was really upset that he had to pose as Springtrap, but he also had no choice as all the other games had been taken. Luca suggested that Nolan be Springtrap instead, but when Nolan took the Springtrap suit off the rack, he said it was really realistic, and that it even stunk, and to that, Luca said that he was not wearing it. Luca then suggested that Asher be Springtrap, but then Asher made a face that basically said that he looks as cute as a bunny, which is kind of ironic since Springtrap himself is a bunny, and that's what Luca is suggesting Asher be. Maddie told Luca to just suck it up and put the costume on, so he considered it. However, after looking at it for a bit, he realized that the suit, it was really an abomination, like it was a rabbit made by an evil scientist. Not a cute rabbit. It was old and rusty, but then Luca thought about it a bit. Was it really rust, or was it something else? The reason he hated the idea of being Springtrap was because of the story of who Springtrap was. He thought about the story of Springtrap, how it was the alter ego of William Afton who killed a bunch of kids and got trapped inside the rabbit suit and died. Stories suggest that Afton's corpse had somehow reanimated, coming back to life, or somehow barely surviving and being an even more ruthless monster. Fazbear Entertainment decided to make light of this storyline and make him a part of the games. When Luca grabbed the suit, he almost instantly dropped it. The fur was crusty and the suit seemed to be covered in some kind of invisible slime. Luca was having none of this, suggesting that they all just play teens and only pretend Springtrap is after them, but that idea was stupid. Eventually Maddie was fed up and said that Luca is acting like a baby. Asher told him the suit was fake and that it wasn't going to hurt him. Luca's friends didn't understand how messed up it was to dress up as the murderer, and they didn't think about what it was like for the kids that died. Luca was thinking about them though. When he was younger, Luca knew a kid named Kenny, and they would play together by a creek. Kenny went missing and was eventually found dead, near the creek that he and Luca would play at. He had been kidnapped and killed. Luca still sometimes had nightmares about looking for Kenny but being too late to save him. Luca never told his friends about Kenny, partially because he thought they'd just make fun of him for having nightmares about it. After a bit more convincing from Maddie, Luca finally, begrudgingly, decided to become a Springtrap. When he put on the suit, he felt disgusted. After putting on the head, he almost gagged at the smell. It was awful. He tried to take the head back off because he couldn't do it anymore, but the guys sealed him off and told him that he wasn't getting out of this. Luca agreed that he'd look like even more of a coward if he backed down now. Heading toward the set for Green-Eared Killer, Luca noticed that the little girls he saw earlier were now being eyed by an employee with a name tag that said Earl on it. The way Earl looked at the girls, though, seemed malicious. When a couple boys ran into the dressing room, Earl's gaze transferred over to them, but the expression on his face didn't change. Getting distracted by Maddie, Luca forgot about Earl, but when he remembered, he looked back and saw that Earl was gone. He looked around the dressing room, but Earl was nowhere to be found. Now going into the set for Green-Eared Killer, Luca found that the location was dead accurate. All the sets for the roleplay areas were hybrids of different locations, and while Luca hadn't been to the original Freddy's or Fazbear's Fright, he had played the FNaF games, and the set, which was the layout of the original Freddy's with the theme of Fazbear's Fright, was perfectly authentic. Luca at Springtrap was to start in the safe room with the door closed, and once the door opened again, he would have to chase them and try to stab them or grab them or something. Luca suddenly felt something rubbing against the back of his neck. When he tried to reach for it, it stopped, but his neck was scratchy now. The others left and Luca was stuck in the uncomfortable costume. When he put it on, the suit expanded to fit him, but now it felt like it was conforming to him, and the metal framework was poking his body in a bunch of different places. Instead of going directly to the safe room, Luca wanted to explore. He ventured through the supposed replica of Freddy Fazbear's Pizza. However, he could have sworn that it was so accurate that it could have been the real thing. It looked really old. The animatronics were there too. He was a bit late to go to the safe room, and the others had already done their break into the restaurant, so he had to move fast. However, when he made it to the hallway by the safe room, he stopped. He knew this was the very hallway that was used to lure the children to the safe room, and again, he could have sworn that it was the real thing. Heading down the hall, something in the Springtrap suit gouged his arm, causing him to make a sound that Maddie could even hear. However, she got distracted by the animatronics, so it was all good. Once he got inside the safe room, Luca realized that the door had locked behind him, which wasn't ideal, but he assumed that the door would unlock after a bit of time anyway. While searching the pitch-black room, Luca found a rubber knife. When the door finally opened, Luca was revealed and rushed out. As he did, things kept poking against his body. As he was about to attack, a bunch of lights and loud rock music began. Just as quickly as it started, it had shut off, and Luca used this opportunity to go for it. He snuck up next to Maddie, his knife raised. Dim lighting came back though, and when Maddie saw Luca, she screamed. He didn't mean to actually scare her, and he tried to see if she was okay, but she ran towards Pirate's Cove, where a Foxy statue run by a rope and pulley system swiped its hook at her. Luca even jumped at this Foxy thing in response himself, but when he did, something gripped his thigh. Maddie ran away, and Asher and Nolan followed her, all three disappearing down a long hallway. Luca yelled for his friends, but assumed that they thought he was still just pretending to be Springtrap. Luca gripped his leg, realizing that whatever had grabbed him had broken his skin, and his blood was trickling down his leg now. Luca was limping through the dining room, and when the other three returned and saw him, they ran back towards the lobby. Searching through the restaurant, Luca eventually found that his friends were hiding in the parts and service room. Right before he was going to open the door, it swung open, and Nolan, wielding an animatronic leg, attacked Luca. Luca grabbed it from Nolan's hand and tried to attack back, but the three ran away again. Luca didn't get what the point of the game was. If they were just going to run away, hide in a corner, he would find them and rinse and repeat. As Luca walked down the hall toward his friends, something in the suit gouged his ribs, and he grabbed his side. Luca heard the speakers in the restaurant shoot out a little boy's laughter, and then the word, hello. Luca remembered that this was a feature in one of the VR games, and that he was hearing Balloon Boy's voice, which he wasn't very fond of. In one of those VR games, you could play Balloon Boy's voice in the building to distract Springtrap. Luca found himself in a recreation of a security office, where there was no windows or anything, no way out of the room, except a vent that he found. When he found it, he crouched down to think, but when he did, something in the suit snapped and cut his hip, and again, blood ran down his leg. He was convinced the suit was dangerous and wanted out of it. The only way to get out of the game was if all four participants pushed the exit door at the same time, meaning Luca had to find his friends and convince them to end the game. He heard Maddie giggling, and it seemed like the sound came from the vents, so instead of going in after them, since they had a hard start, Luca decided to guess that they would get out in the dining room. He tried to speed his way over there, but the swift movement caused another cut into his chest. He knew he had to get out of the suit, so instead of staying inside the whole time, he decided to just take it off. However, because of the Springtrap hands, he couldn't find a way to get the head off without help. He had the idea to take off the chest first and then the head after that once his hands were free, but when he tried to open up the fasteners that kept the suit on, a click sounded and Luca was stabbed in the chest. He yelled, and his yell seemed to startle Maddie, who screamed. Luca tried his best to calm down and followed the sound of Maddie's scream. It seemed to come from a party room near the arcade. Luca began on his way there as he needed to let his friends know what was going on. He was pretty sure he knew what was going on, and if he was in big trouble. He believed that he was wearing a springlock suit, which had been suits that could either function as animatronics or suits. They had been discontinued not long after they were first created, though, as the springlocks could be triggered by movement, and if they were triggered fully, it would be fatal. Luca didn't think Fast Food Entertainment logically would have put a real springlock suit in the costume closet, but he knew that that was what he was inside. When Luca made it to the party room, he decided to wait for everyone to get out of the vent for him to actually explain the situation. He heard the three struggling to get the vent cover off, but they eventually did. Nolan and Maddie got out of the vent and started making out. Luca tried to grab Maddie's arm to will her to listen to him, but as he did that, something in the Springtrap head snapped, and there was pressure piercing through his scalp and basically enclosing his whole face, shooting excruciating pain through Luca's head. Maddie was able to free herself from Luca, and the three ran away. He tried to call out for them, but it didn't come out right because of the pain, and because the metal had curled into and cut his mouth, filling it with blood. He swallowed the blood and tried to stop his friends, telling them to wait and stop, but the words couldn't come out right because of what was in his mouth. And Luca's friends were just laughing, thinking Luca was just in character. As he chased his friends, he kept bumping into things, making them laugh even harder. When he bumped into a table, sharp objects jolted into Luca's arms and legs. It was so painful that it felt like they went all the way through him. The pain was agonizing and it made him scream, which made his friends stop dead in their tracks. Luca tried to beg for help, but the sounds he made were just raspy gurgling sounds. These dumbasses still thought that he was just being in character, despite the fact that the guy never wanted to be Springtrap in the first place. He never wanted to be in character. Somehow Luca's supposed friends didn't realize that something was legitimately wrong, and they left him there. Luca considered staying where he was, as his friends would have come to get him when the game ended, but he realized that blood was basically pouring out of him at this point, so he needed to find his friends before he passed out or bled out. When he eventually found his friends again, they were playing with something on the wall, and a creepy voice on the speaker said, "There isn't room in here for both of us." Luca rushed towards his friends, still trying to call for them, but failing. Asher kept staring at him with a smile on his face, still thinking that he was playing the part and just doing it really well. By this point, Luca didn't even care about setting off the springlocks as the damage was already done. He was just trying to get out of the suit before he couldn't be helped anymore. After more time passed, Luca, maybe to take a break from all the pain, started thinking about his memories, like a camping trip from a while ago. He remembered a conversation that he'd had with his dad regarding how one of Luca's friends had gotten caught stealing a car with a group of his friends. His dad told him that when in a group, you often think more about what the rest of the group thinks rather than what your own values are. Basically, they can pressure you into doing something you don't want to do. The memory faded and Luca was back to excruciating pain. By this point, he was in too much pain to still go on. He dropped to the floor and closed his eyes as he realized his friends were too far and there was no way he could reach them. We then cut to Nolan, Asher, and Maddie walking out of the set for Green-Eared Killer, talking about how cool it was and how good Luca was at Springtrap. They decided that Luca would figure out eventually that the game was over and would come join them once they did. Meanwhile, Luca was still stuck in the restaurant, and when he woke up, he wondered whether or not his friends were still here. He managed to find the strength to push on, though. He began looking around, making his way to the backstage area, and it seemed like things had moved around. He had a bad feeling he wasn't alone in here, and he didn't think it was his friends that were still here. He suddenly heard the voices of children coming from the dining room, and when he went back to the dining room, he saw two little girls and one little boy, all dressed similarly to how Luca's supposed friends were earlier. Luca didn't want the kids to see him, not just because he was dressed up as a terrifying Springtrap, but because of his condition. When the kids left the dining room and went down the hall, Luca stepped out from behind the curtain, but he heard a sound from backstage. He managed to find Earl, the creepy employee from earlier, putting on a cheap-looking Springtrap onesie. Earl was dressing up as the killer, but given his creepy nature earlier, Luca didn't know whether this was an act or not. He didn't have much strength, but he used what he had to charge at Earl, trying to tackle him, but when he did, Earl was gone. He began searching for Earl, pretty sure that he had gone into the storage room, but Luca was making so much noise that Earl could have slipped away so easily. The kids strategized on where to go, and once they left, Earl showed up, heading towards where one of the kids was headed. Luca had no idea how he got there, but he looked again, and Earl was gone once again. But he quickly found Earl slipping into a vent. Luca guessed he would use the vent to sneak up on one of the kids and capture her where no one would find them. Luca headed towards the kitchen, but had to stop. He didn't think he would be able to move again, but then he heard one of the little girls, a girl named Amy, screaming. Earl seemed to have trapped her in a maintenance closet, so Luca headed there and busted into the closet. He saw Earl holding on to Amy, but when Earl saw Luca, he was really confused. He loosened his grip on Amy, and she took that opportunity to bite him and run out of the room. Earl tried to go after her, but Luca wouldn't let that happen. He tried to tackle Earl and accidentally fell on him, but that worked. After some struggling, he had Earl pinned and basically just murdered him. But he was happy because the last action he did wasn't what somebody else wanted. His last act was his own. He finally gave way and let himself die from the spring locks, and the story ends right there. This story was really dark. What I like about it is that the title has 3 different meanings. The first is probably the most obvious. As Luca was in the springlock suit for longer and longer, the springlocks had more tension and put more pressure on his head. The second meaning is that Luca's friends pressured him into putting on the suit. I feel like it's kind of interesting because somnophobia and pressure have a lot in common. Both are high school seniors with their friends at Freddy Fazbear's Mega Pizzaplex. Their friends are kind of fake, being huge dicks, yet also not having huge dicks. The main character is the most logical one and is the one who is picked on the most and is the most behind in terms of growing. Both of them relive their memories, remembering a valuable lesson about their dads, but only remembering the lesson after they've already contradicted the point of the lesson, but then in the end following it, but still dying. And the final way that the word pressure applies to this story is through Luca's feelings for Maddie. Whenever Nolan and Maddie show affection for each other, Luca feels pressure in his chest because of his jealousy. This story was fantastic. I don't really know if I like it better than Somnophobia or not, but they're probably pretty equal. There is something interesting about this story, though. The Fazbear Entertainment video games are a huge part of the story, being the stuff that helps Luca make the connections, and also absolutely confirming that they were real events and not just made up stuff. However, at one point in the story, Luca hears the Balloon Boy sound effects on the speakers. He recognizes this as being a feature where you can distract Springtrap in one of the VR games. Just think about that. He doesn't recognize it from one of the non-VR games, he recognizes it as specifically from the VR game, the one that we play in FNaF VR Help Wanted. That's what he recognizes it from. Earlier in the story, he also talks about how some of the game functions, like with closing doors, dressing as animatronics to hide from the actual animatronics, and crawling through vents, are the mechanics in the Fazbear Entertainment games. Closing doors matches FNaF 1, dressing as animatronics matches the mask from FNaF 2, but crawling through vents? Springtrap crawls through vents in FNaF 3, yeah, but the player doesn't. The only time the player ever crawls through vents is in Sister Location, which we know not to be a game. What this means is that the games that we play are not the same games that exist in Universe, or at the very least, the FNaF 3 version of the game is very different. This could be because Steve was making the game at the peak of his dread, resulting in the game ending up actually being scary, but who knows. But anyways guys, that's all there is to talk about for this video. I hope you all enjoyed, and let me know your thoughts on the story in the comments down below. The next summary will be on the final main story in the book titled Clithrophobia. I genuinely don't have any idea if I'm pronouncing that right, but if I'm wrong, I don't really care. So stay tuned for the summary for that story, and the summary for the epilogue will be out the day after. The summary for Clithrophobia will either be out tomorrow or the day after, most likely, so stay tuned, and I'll see you all in the next video. Bye guys!